8 minutes past 8 Central African time, and we're going to be kickstarting the show with international relations expert here at Salam Media, Professor Van Heerden. Because for weeks now, there had been very, very somewhat cautious optimism that one of the world's most volatile flashpoints was finally beginning to cool. The US-Israeli war on Iran took two quiet diplomatic channels which had reopened, and there were indirect negotiations that looked like were taking shape. There was almost a renewed hope that the USA and Iran, especially, could step back from the brink. But that optimism has proven short lived. Fresh American strikes on Iranian linked targets, followed by retaliatory attacks from Iran, have once again raised fears that the fragile path towards diplomacy is beginning to unravel. Questions are now being asked about whether this is simply another round of calculated brinkmanship, if I can put it like that, or the beginning of a much broader regional escalation, or maybe a Cold War style kind of scenario between the US and Iran. And we're going to be getting facts of why we are where we're currently finding ourselves. And we're joined by Professor Oscar van Heerden, who'll be helping us unpack these rapidly developing events. Prof, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure having you on the show. Good morning.
Good morning, Salila, and good morning to your listeners.
Pleasure is all ours. I want to get right into it. I want to begin with where we currently find ourselves. I think the last few hours from midnight have been quite interesting, with those attacks from the United States of America on Iran. This is after weeks of diplomatic engagement that looked like they were going to bear fruits, but we're once again talking about attacks or talking about missiles rather than negotiations. From your perspective, what exactly changed? Why are we finding ourselves where we currently find ourselves?
Yeah, what changed, Salila, is that Donald Trump can't. There's two things. One, he can't accept that he has been strategically defeated. He still wants to make demands. He still wants to pretend that he is the victor, that he is in control, that he is the bigger and mightier party to negotiations, when in fact he strategically lost this war and he needs to accept the demands of the Iranians. That's the first thing, an inability to accept defeat. The second thing is an inability to rein in the war criminal Netanyahu and his right-wing government in Israel. Because one of the key agreements in the MOU, as far as the Iranians is concerned, was that there needs to be peace in the region, including Lebanon. The Israeli forces, the IDF, needs to withdraw from southern Lebanon and stop bombing and killing. And Netanyahu is refusing to do so. So, in a nutshell, if we look at this from an ideological point of view, Trump is unable to accept this because the Zionist AIPAC forces in America, as well as the Israelis in the state of Israel, are not playing ball. And that's why we find ourselves back in the conflict. Because the Iranians basically said, look, we're going to keep the strait closed for certain ships, particularly American, Israelis, and Western Europe. And we are going to allow some of our friends through, China, Russia, and a few others. And of course, this was unacceptable to Trump. And now we are back to the same dance, which we know the outcome, what it's going to be.
I want to talk about the negotiations and what was discussed there, because it looked like there was some ground that was being gained, but the United States said it launched airstrikes against Iranian military targets after Iran allegedly attacked 3 commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz. How much of this is fact? Because Iran came out and rejected that the US justification says the attacks are unlawful, and in response, Iran itself launched missiles and drones at US military facilities in Bahrain and Kuwait. it's just perplexing. I know you unpacked it, I think, quite well on why we find ourselves, but from Iran's perspective, because the US is making it sound like they're the ones that strike first. Is that the reality? And if so, why would they?
The United States are playing games, Taylor. That's the truth. They are playing games. The truth here is that Iran made it very clear that within the first 60 days, let's establish trust. And trust is you release some of our funds, and we will slowly open the Strait of Hormuz. Now, what happened was that there was a delay, and money was not being transferred because this is not rocket science. It's not a matter of 2 weeks before you can release money. It's a press of a button. And already certain ships wanted to go through the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran said, no, hold on. We've not yet reached agreement here. Because if we allow the first volley of ships to pass through, then it's as if we are already saying that we are now opening the Strait of Hormuz and everything is hunky-dory. And Iran was saying, no, and those ships tried to force it. They didn't want to stop. So Iran said, no, we have to put our foot down. We have to establish dominance in terms of the Strait of Hormuz, because that is our main bargaining chip. And so they fired on those ships and forced them to stop. And America then realized that their delaying tactic and wanting to tacitly force Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz is not working. And so they got angry. And so they then retaliated and fired missiles. And then, of course, Iran had to step up and respond and attack some of the military bases. And that's where we are now. So the question of who fired first and who, that is inconsequential. It's actually not important. The problem is that Donald Trump wants to try and be clever. It's the same way as Salilo, how he manipulates the markets. On a Friday, he's talking peace and we are making progress and we are about to sign so that he can calm the markets. And then on the Monday, on the weekend, he then attacks because the markets are closed. And then when it comes back on Monday, he says, oh, no, it was just an exchange of kaya, but we are talking, we're about to sign. He's manipulating. So he thinks he's being clever with the Iranians. And the Iranians are saying that for us, this is a straightforward thing. We are not going to give up our control of the Strait of Hormuz because we've now realized that by controlling that choke point, we are actually dictating to the global market that things need to happen in a certain way. You need to rein in your Trump administration, and Trump must rein in the Israelis. Otherwise, oil, gas, fertilizer, and all other goods are going to be affected with regards to the Strait of Hormuz.
And I suppose that's the unfortunate part for the rest of the world. I want us to go on a quick break, but when we come back, I want to touch on, several underlying issues that appear to maybe also have contributed to the collapse of these negotiations. Whether you look at the fact that there was no really an agreement that was reached on Iran's uranium enrichment program, the general lack of trust between, the two parties, sanctions relief, I think is also one thing. There was no clear, I think, concrete or foundation for diplomacy to be fulfilled here, at least from my opinion. But I want to touch on those after this short break.
It's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying, or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
Right now, over 150 million children around the world are orphaned, facing hunger, hardship, and uncertainty. With Islamic Relief's Orphan Sponsorship Program, you can provide a child with access to education, nutritious food, essential healthcare, and a safe home. Your sponsorship is not just support, it's hope, security, and a brighter future. Be the reason an orphan child smiles again. Sponsor an orphan today with Islamic Relief.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Are you banking with convenience, transparency, and flexibility? With Al Baraka Bank's transactional banking account, you can enjoy convenient everyday banking designed around your needs. Benefit from zero fees on point-of-sale transactions and manage your banking easily through Al Baraka's secure mobile banking app and internet banking platform. From everyday payments to managing your personal or business banking, Al Baraka makes banking simple, transparent, and convenient. Visit albaraka.co.za to learn more. Al Baraka, your partner bank. Al Baraka Bank Limited is an authorized financial services and credit provider.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
(20 minutes past 8 Central African time), and you're still tuned in to News and Views. Myself, Salaila Makwidiri. I'm still in conversation with international relations expert Dr. Oscar van Heerden, and we're talking about the resumption of fire between the United States of America and Iran. And Prof, before we went on to that short break, at least from my opinion, and I've also, I think, read what a few experts argue, the fact that the negotiations that we're also happy about largely concentrated on immediate crisis management rather than building a broader security framework that address the underlying sources of conflict. And you might agree with that, considering that there were a lot of things that were left hanging. For instance, there was no immediate agreement on uranium enrichment. The US wanted Iran to significantly curb its nuclear program, but Iran insisted it has the right to enrich uranium for peaceful purposes. The issue of mistrust between the two countries, sanctions and security, I think you touched on that quite briefly. Just looking back at those negotiations from your perspective, what would have been the biggest gaps and those gaps ultimately leading us to the latest escalation between the US and Iran?
Salaila, it's unfortunate that we find ourselves here at this stage because we are only in the phase of the Memorandum of Understanding, and we need to see it as such. The MOU was to set a framework towards those issues that you have mentioned, where after 60 days, once we've established bona fides, what they call bona fides, in other words, that each party is trustworthy and genuine. And then they said, how do we establish those bona fides? The Iranians said, well, you've got some of our money, frozen assets. We'd like 300 billion of that. And then we can see that there's bona fides on your part. The Americans said, to establish bona fides, we'd like you to open the Strait of Hormuz and let all traffic start flowing. They said, fine, not a problem. Once money is transferred, and we will open the strait. Obviously, gradually, we will remove some of the mines that we've laid in some of the waters and so forth. And so within a 60-day period, by the time we get to the end of that 60 days, there should be complete 100% free flow of ships and transport in the Strait of Hormuz. And then the party said, okay, fine, where do we sign? Let's go to Switzerland, we'll sign. Now, as I explained earlier, America did not honor their part of the agreement because when Trump went back, when Vance and Witkoff then came back to America, thinking that they've now reached an agreement. We will touch on, the MOU says, once bona fides has been established, after 60 days, then we are going to engage with the substantive issues. What is the future of the Strait of Hormuz? When are we going to see the removal of the nuclear material in terms of enrichments? Can you continue enriching, even if it is for civilian purposes? IAEA inspections and all of those things. That was going to be dealt with, substantive issues, after 60 days. But they couldn't even wait till the 60 days. And here we are now, back to conflict and the resumption of the war. And the outcome, if I may, Lilo, is that we should ask the question, why did they agree on a ceasefire in the first place? And there's three reasons I could put forward. One, they didn't anticipate that Iran was going to fire on their Gulf neighbors. And in terms of international law, in terms of war, the rules of war, the rules of engagement, they were within their right to attack those states because they were hosting military bases. And those were the same military bases that were attacking Iran. So they never anticipated that Iran was actually going to fire on their neighbors and destroy property. That's the first thing. The second thing is, even though they anticipated it, perhaps, they didn't think that they were going to be able to continue holding the Strait of Hormuz. I'm sure that Trump, because Trump likes to speak very verbose, most mightiest military in the world. You will listen to the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. It's like he's on drugs when he talks about we are going to do this and we are going to stop that and so on and so forth. But the truth is that they quickly realized that they do not have or possess the military ability to actually push the Iranians back from closing the Strait of Hormuz. And then as a result, they opted to block the blockage. I mean, really stupid. But anyway, that's the second thing. And then the third element was obviously the continuous pummeling of the State of Israel. I mean, if you remember, during that 100 days, I think there was something like 90 waves of attacks on Israel with very sophisticated missiles. They had thought that they knew the Iranians had a stockpile of missiles, but they didn't know how much and or how many. And the truth is that the Iranians are simply not running out of them. They have been stockpiling missiles and developing missiles, very sophisticated missiles, by the way, supersonic, intermediate, short range, and all kinds of missiles, including an army of drones over the last couple of decades. And they have been stockpiling this, preparing for this war since the 8-year war with Iraq. So the Americans were just caught completely off guard. They didn't know the enemy that they are engaging with, and they were completely defeated. They even made a mockery of the aircraft carrier, the most mightiest weapon in the arsenal of the Americans. But it is only, we've now realized it's only mighty if it can come and park off your coast and fly in and bomb the hell out of you. But if you have missiles that can target the aircraft carrier itself, then you then find a situation which we found in the Persian Gulf, where the aircraft carrier had to park so many thousands of kilometers away in order not to be reached by missiles, which then makes it ineffective. Because if the aircrafts take off, they will have to be refueled, which then exposes them to be attacked and so on and so forth. So, America just miscalculated this whole thing. And I think that what Trump is now trying to do is what he said he's going to do before the ceasefire and the MOU, which is to try and threaten Iran with bombing them back to the Stone Age and to wipe civilization off the face of the earth. It is simply not going to work because the Iranians have now realized they only have to do one thing, and that is to keep the strait closed.
My last question to you, Prof, or maybe at least last two questions would be, is there still space for diplomacy here? Can we see a scenario where there are peace talks that might emerge, or are we entering a Cold War kind of style phase between the US and Iran where the confrontation will shift? Maybe I think maybe a bit different from a Cold War style, because there are missiles being thrown at each other between the two countries, and it's direct combat, while in a Cold War style would obviously be slightly different to that, where it would be, I don't know, cyber attacks or sanctions over one over the other. But would that be a scenario, a similar Cold War kind of standoff between the two countries until, I don't know, maybe Trump 2.0 passes?
Well, look, first we must be clear, Sly. It's not missile exchanges between the two countries. America is not being fired on. America is very far from the Persian Gulf. What is happening here is Iran is firing on military assets and military bases of the United States in the region. And the escalation, of course, is going to be, if Gulf states are not going to put pressure on their ally, America, to bring this to an end, then Iran is going to up the escalation and start targeting infrastructure in those Gulf states. All the while, the strait will be closed, and the world economy will be a problem. Trump is under severe pressure, Lilo. There's November elections coming. The gas price or the petrol price in America is already rising. People are beginning to feel the cost of living pinch. And he needs to bring this war to an end with all the bravado that he's talking about. He is under enormous pressure to not continue this war. And so, the only way this is going to end, it can't even end with a Cold War style approach. It simply cannot. They have to bring this war to an end. They have to agree to Iranian demands. Israel will have to be reined in, and they have to realize that the geostrategic and the geopolitical nature of the Middle East has changed forever. Now with Iran being a dominant hegemon, not only Israel. Netanyahu doesn't want to accept it. Trump doesn't want to accept it. And unless they all lose their heads and just go for full-out war, which will probably go on for a few years and destroy the global economy, cooler heads will have to prevail. And cooler heads is not coming from Iran. Cooler heads must come from Washington and from Tel Aviv.
Professor Oscar van Heerden, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure chatting to you. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Lila.
There you go. That was international relations expert Oscar van Heerden helping us unpack the renewed tensions between the United States of America and Iran. This is as concerns continue to grow over whether diplomacy can withstand another dangerous escalation. What are your thoughts? 01168000355, or you can send us a WhatsApp 0617660355. Do you see an ending to this war? Is there still space for diplomacy, or are we approaching a Cold War kind of standoff between the two countries? Professor Oscar van Heerden doesn't seem to think so. He clearly states that the war needs to come to an end at some point, because the world's economy simply can't continue going on with the Strait of Hormuz operating not at its maximum. So yeah, I think we'll only wait and see. But my opinion is I don't see an ending to this, because an ending to this would be the United States of America and Donald Trump admitting that, they've lost the war. I mean, they couldn't even define what winning it is, but admitting that they've lost the war, and I don't see that happening. They would rather keep us in this limbo, a state of nothingness without answers to any questions. And yeah, we'll see how it all unfolds. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with you after this.